Hello and welcome everybody to this webinar, one in a series that's taking a look at the future of work. With me today I have Andrew Cox, and we're going to talk about Agile Times call for Agile Teams. Now Andrew, you're known for your agility. Perhaps you could give us a little introduction.
Yeah, sure. I'm an occupational psychologist specialising in organisational assessments. So for the last 20 years or so, I've been working with organisations and for organisations, looking at areas such as engagement and culture and organisational effectiveness, primarily within the financial sector, but not exclusively. I've worked with a number of organisations across those years, across all sectors.
Okay, it'd be good to get your perspective on some of the things that we'll talk about today. On the slide itself here, measured agility for every team across your business. Are there any limitations on teams in terms of sectors? I mean, you say you know financial services, and we'll get to some examples of that, I'm sure. Are there any places we shouldn't go with when we're thinking about teams?
No, I don't think so. I think you need to be clear what you mean by a team. And teams are ubiquitous. There are very few people working within any kinds of organisations who are not part of a team. And the way I think of teams is a group of people working together to achieve a common purpose with complementary skills. And I think that's a very good functional way of looking at it. And so your CEO is a member of a team. Everybody within the organisation is part of a team. And it's very, very unusual for people to be working exclusively on their own.
Well, indeed. So that's teams, and we'll have a look at what we mean by agile teams in a second. I just wanted to focus a little bit on agile times as well, in case people are wondering, you know, what on earth are you talking about, Scott? I borrowed this slide from a previous webinar where we talk about those things that are causing businesses to change from some current organizational structure into some future organizational structure. Whether that's market conditions like mergers, acquisitions, whether it's things like international trade. I don't know if you saw the story in the news recently. Harley Davidson, of all companies perhaps, is thinking of moving some of its production outside of the US, an iconic US brand, and because of the tariffs, and Harley Davidson gets hit twice actually by tariffs on the way in on its steel and tariffs on the way back out to Europe. So you know, those kind of changes. Disruptive technology, we hear about AI, robots, machine learning a lot. Companies like Uber coming in and bringing entirely new business models, really forcing organizations to move from a current state to a future state. And we'll have a look at teams. You mentioned teams and a great definition of those a moment ago. I'd love to get your thoughts on just how far businesses are along any kind of transformation. You know, we see this, what's often described as the norm, the status quo, hierarchical teams, command and control, split regionally, geographically, and maybe they're moving to a networked environment, although I must admit I remember working in a network environment, you know, more than 10 years ago, for sure. And today, tomorrow, moving to this much more loosely connected network, you know, team of teams kind of approach. How far do you think companies are along this progression? I
think some companies are already there. I think the majority have a long way to go. And the majority, by the majority I mean the larger, well-established organisations with very firmly developed cultures.
Right.
They tend still to be quite hierarchical, quite paternalistic in the way they make decisions.
Right.
Quite unwilling to delegate the kinds of decisions down to individuals within teams that they really could be doing.
But aren't these exactly the businesses that are under pressure by newer market entrants that are adopting these much more agile ways of working and agile ways of decision making and development and all of these things? So is there a need for larger companies to react to the smaller market entrants, you know, taking their market share? Is that one of the drivers?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. And the speed of decision making. And the speed of change in an environment where as you say, for a plethora of reasons, change is accelerating all the time. And an organization that can't adapt to changing circumstances will have huge problems in remaining competitive. It's an absolute truism.
So what's enabling this change? Are there any technology as well as organizational type things that people should look out for? Collaboration, that kind of thing.
For example, if you're thinking about the retail sector, if you're a member of a team within a particular branch, or in manufacturing, if you're within a particular manufacturing location, it is quite difficult traditionally it has been quite difficult to interact in a meaningful way with teams located elsewhere. But now it's much more possible to do that, facilitated through technology. So, not necessarily just social media, but that's a very good example of how you can establish virtual teams and communication between teams and idea generation and best practice sharing. That makes that a lot easier than has traditionally been the case.
I guess there are lots of channels now, like Slack, like MS Teams, like Chatter, lots of different communications channels that way. We ran our own customer advisory board recently, where we connected 3 offices together for the day to collaborate. And I think one thing we'll look at next time is doing some virtual whiteboarding, for example. Yeah. So all of those technology things.
But above and beyond all of that, I think, as you know, my working culture has taught me to understand that a lot of this lies in people's heads.
Yep.
And so if you have the mindset whereby you are open to collaboration and open to other sources of ideas and open to sharing yours, and you have the tools to do so, and you understand the benefit of doing so, that's when things start to happen. It is not something that you can impose on people through technology unless they have that mindset and understand the benefits for themselves and for the organization of doing so.
So organizational, technological, but also all of that emotional, the people, I guess. One of the things that got us into this conversation was Burson by Deloitte stating that 80% of businesses will be affected by this trend toward agile organizations. I remember, again, 7 or 8 years ago, CTO of a company where I worked at the time saying, "Hey, we're moving to agile development," and we had lots of conversations about how that would work. And as product director, I then had to move product management to be agile. Marketing then had to follow to become agile, and so did sales. So whilst there were clear and immediate benefits for the rate at which we were able to develop products and align them with customer needs, moving very quickly, the rest of the business had to follow very quickly with that. So.
The first thing that springs to mind, well, the first question I ask from that stat is, who are the 20% that aren't going to be impacted? But also, okay, I'm unashamedly coming from the perspective of a employee engagement, employee research specialist. So yeah. I come down to the level of the employees' behaviors people. And culture. And you can have all the agile processes in the world, but unless you have that agility mindset, it's not going to work.
Yeah, I was looking around as well for recent examples of this, because again, whilst this all sounds great, does it actually deliver something? And 2nd of July, an article published in the Harvard Business Review that's definitely worth reading for people listening in today. A global engineering firm, one that you might imagine would find itself in difficulty because of lots of the business drivers that we spoke about early on. Instead of cost cutting from the center, it empowered all of its teams to do so. And as a result, even in its first 100 days, it saw increased cash position, it reduced its debt, and it registered anticipated profitability gain. And over the first year of moving to this agile empowerment of teams, it actually saw its share price increase 4-fold. Some other thinking that we reviewed in the work that we do at Questback was taking a look at the Crystal team of teams. That's something that's been brought from the military into the workplace. And there's lots of quotes from that. But when we stopped holding the teams back, we gave them an order, in his case, to simply place his ship alongside that of the enemy. They thrived because they had that autonomy. And there was a lot of research that Google did into why are some teams better than others. And the thing that bubbled to the surface was this idea of psychological safety. And in the best teams, they found members listen to one another and show sensitivity to feelings and needs. So some of this has been around for a while. Some of it's very new. But let's take a little look at bringing this into something that we can help with for people listening. So if an agile team is one that's empowered to make fast decisions, find new ways of overcoming obstacles, and to drive innovation, I started to group these together a little bit. These teams have freedom. They make decisions quickly and locally, and they innovate, challenge, and reinvent. Another one that I saw that was really interesting is that these teams should be coached, not commanded. So leadership should make available and should direct roughly where the teams are going and what they should be doing. But those teams should be self-improving and self-analyzing, self-critical. And progress, and this comes very much from development in the first place, get things out there, don't get them perfect, get them out there, get them in the hands of customers, develop them a little bit further with fast feedback loops. And this is where agility spreads across the entire organization. Do you think that's a fair description of an agile team? Are there other things that we should be thinking about?
Yes, I do. I think an agile team needs to have the freedom and the confidence to make mistakes. But having said that, those freedoms need to be within certain parameters, which are well understood. And when people do have an understanding of where their discretion and the extent of that discretion lies, and they are not punished for honest mistakes or unsuccessful attempts at doing something new, then obviously that is an ideal scenario. But that needs to be very much within certain well-defined parameters.
Yeah.
The obvious example will be in the financial services sector within the rules of what compliance dictates, or in the manufacturing sector, health and safety, or in the healthcare sector, overall concerns about patient care, which do require an understanding of integrity, which do need clear alignment with what the organization is trying to achieve more generally and what the team objectives are. And empowerment goes hand in hand with innovation. If people come up with ideas, give them the wherewithal and the ability to implement those locally.
Yeah, one of the distinctions that people draw is sometimes between decisions or changes to processes or innovations being efficient rather than being effective. And I think this gets to the heart a little bit of what you're saying. It's very tempting to shortcut a process or fix the process for your own individual needs or those of your team's expediency. But they've got to be effective in delivering that freedom and delivering the gains that the business is actually looking for. Otherwise, it's chaos kind of ensues, it seems to me.
Well, yeah, and a prime example is the impact on the customers.
Right.
If you might be improving efficiencies left, right, and centre, but if it's having a negative impact on your customers, then obviously that is probably not the kind of thing we'll be looking at. And obviously, team members who are providing that service to the customers are the first people to find out if that negative impact is being apparent.
Yeah, we'll come on to call centres in a moment, because I think call centres are a great place. And there are good examples out there. We've seen them on other webinars where call centre customer contact representatives have been given much more power, much more freedom, much more the ability to actually self-improve, and actually customer service and customer lifetime value and all of those great measures have increased. Even customer loyalty has increased by empowering. So this isn't just development. This does include, I think call centers are a great place to start with this, by the way. I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So if we've defined what an agile team is, and said it needs that freedom. It needs to be coached. It needs to be able to make meaningful progress. We balance that out with some of these things like accountability, ensuring that things are realistic and they're not chaotic. We then need to broaden this out a little bit and think about, do all teams need to be marching in the same direction? And companies normally only have one mission and they have one strategy, which might well be changing as a result of this. And that strategy is delivered through objectives. How important is this, that we have one of each of these things that we're all marching behind?
First of all, to address your first point, I think we have a very good understanding of what constitutes a high-performing team culture. We pretty much know. And we pretty much know that this is universal across teams, no matter which sector they're working in, no matter whether they're at the top of the organisation or at the bottom of the hierarchy. And it's all coming down with shared purpose and commitment to common values. And clearly, those are just a couple of the areas, but clearly those need to be defined in the organisational context, which tends to be around organisational strategy and objectives and vision and values and these kinds of things. That's great, but what every member of the team needs to understand is how behaviourally that impacts upon what they should and they shouldn't be doing. Now, organisations are spectacularly bad at that. They're very good at encapsulating things into little slogans and phrases, but actually really bad at communicating practically what that means for people on the ground in terms of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that is best done through storytelling, through really detailed scenarios, through discussions within teams.
Have you got an example that would sort of make that real for people? Not naming names, but perhaps somewhere where you've helped out in the past.
One very large financial organisation that I was working with were rolling out a new set of organisational values. Those were 3 phrases, effectively, which everybody was expected to be able to understand and adhere to. So I helped them do some research into the level of understanding and penetration that they had within their workforce, which numbered a few 100,000, so it wasn't a small undertaking.
Big company.
When we asked the question, do you understand the organisational values, 90% of people said yes.
Okay.
When we conducted telephone interviews, caught them cold before they could actually look them up on the internet, we found that 15% could actually do that.
Quite a difference.
A huge difference. And then when we actually objectively tested whether people understood what we required them to do differently, about 60% either were pulling in the wrong direction or believed that no change was actually necessary. Now, under those circumstances, you are not going to get people helping you to achieve your objectives. And the biggest problem there was the majority of people thought that things were actually fine the way that they were.
Yeah, right, okay.
And didn't feel the need to change whatsoever.
And yet the business clearly felt under all sorts of pressure to change and transform and improve customer value and all of those great things.
And in order to drive cultural change, you need to have a common itch that needs scratching.
Right.
And if the majority of your people don't feel the need to change, they simply won't.
Right. So as Harvard Business Review said, recently, communicate, even over communicate as well. Just keep communicating.
Yes, and don't mistake people telling you that everything is okay for a good response.
Yes.
It is not a good response. If you're looking at change, it's a very bad response.
So will teams, or what will prompt teams to sort of organically reach out to other teams? I guess we can look at organisations, and some teams will absorb all of that strategy. They'll take on this whole agile approach, and then they'll start working with other teams, and they'll touch other teams.
Put simply, it's the what's in it for us.
Right. And what is in it for people?
In terms of their performance and how their performance is assessed, you need to incentivize those individual behaviors in terms of working in teams and reaching out and giving and receiving feedback and these kinds of things. So you need to be very clear in the individual and team context what those behaviours are, and to build those into your assessment and performance management processes so that people are absolutely clear. And then from the personal point of view, make it clear what the benefit is for them and for their teams.
Yeah, I think almost everywhere I've ever gone in the world, in businesses, I see a tension between the product guys and the sales guys, and the sales guys saying, "Oh, if only I had this product, I could do that deal next week, or I could have won it last week, but I didn't." And the product guys perhaps not spending enough time out with the customers, and you end up with this sort of spiral down if you're not careful. And for me, that's a real concrete example of where teams clearly have some kind of common aim to go after a particular market with a bunch of products and all make a load of money, but because they're not interacting in a way that's effective, it's not working. And where I have seen it work, it's been absolutely magical to get that kind of commercial engine going, where the sales and marketing and product teams are all marching in the same direction with the same aims, and they're all interacting in this agile kind of way.
Absolutely, but there is always a tension involved with cultural change. So my background's in financial services. So after years of compliance, driving behaviours and driving what people are expected to do and how, after years and years of these compliance issues being driven home, suddenly it becomes apparent that, okay, we're not providing a differentiated service to our customers. We have people doing the wrong things because they're not making discretionary decisions. We're having ossification because people are not able.
What does that mean? That means everything's turning to stone, does it?
Yep, it does, because people locally are not making decisions because they're concerned about the possible consequences of doing it wrongly. And so these are very powerful forces stopping people from taking more responsibility, taking decisions, taking accountability for things. And it's a difficult thing to shift.
So one of the things that we did was we took a look at a lot of the research out there. We took a look at a lot of the academic articles, the more commercial articles, having a look at companies that have succeeded and those that have gone out of business even. And we pulled this together into 5 areas that we really feel that give a measure of team performance. The first one of these, clarity, structure, and efficacy. So, you can get at this by asking people in a team, is it clear what your team is supposed to accomplish? And it is surprising how many teams don't actually really know what it is that they're supposed to be doing. The thing that rose to the top, as I said in the Google research, although as a construct it's been around for quite a while, is this idea of, if you make a mistake on our team, it's never held against you.
Okay. In principle, yeah, absolutely, but it depends on the reason of the source of the mistake. You can make lots of mistakes for different reasons, and people will make mistakes. They'll make honest ones, and they will do the wrong things for the wrong reasons. And we need to be absolutely clear to delineate those.
So genuine mistakes
against cutting a corner, against being expedient and getting something done for the reasons of achieving an aim rather than how you do it.
Right.
So we've got compliance issues, and we've got ethical reasons, and we've got issues there. But if mistakes are made for the right reasons, then absolutely they should not be held against you. Actually, you should probably be rewarded for experimenting in the right kind of way, and so long as you learn from the experience and you share that experience more widely, so you reduce the chance of it happening again.
Doesn't that rely on a couple of other things though that we discovered? That, I mean, if you make a genuine mistake, it's either because you don't have the skills, or you misunderstand what you're meant to be achieving, or it's not been communicated properly, if you like, what your objectives or your mission or your strategy are.
Yeah.
But if you're empowering a team to say, hold on, I've got a skills gap or a knowledge gap, or we've just got a person gap, then I need to learn, because as we say here, we need to take time out to figure out how we can improve our processes. So that's one thing, and people have to take that on board and make the right decisions. But the other is organizational support, because as an individual, if my team says, yeah, it's okay, keep making those mistakes as long as they're good mistakes. But if that means the team's making mistakes, genuine mistakes, you need the business to support that sort of sense as well. And I don't know,
Absolutely.
it feels kind of negative, all of this mistake-driven thing. I don't know.
Well, we're not encouraging people to do the wrong things.
Right.
We're encouraging people to learn from their mistakes and not be afraid of doing so. It's around the same sort of concept as a growth mindset. You know, if you don't make any mistakes, then you're never going to learn and grow. The other side of the coin is around a just culture. So if you work in a culture within an organization where justice prevails in terms of you won't be hit with a big stick if you make an honest and mistake.
I think that gets to the fifth one of these. You know, our team leader inspires the team to innovate and challenge the status quo. Just imagine a leader, as you say, with a big stick waiting. That's you need the opposite of that, don't you? You really need that sort of inspirational leader who's going to say, look, I'm going to provide the air cover. I know what the team's meant to be doing. Let's collaborate on this as a team. Let's understand how we can innovate and how we can challenge. And the organisation will support us. And as long as we learn and we grow, then we will become much more efficient and effective.
Yeah, and a very important part of the leader's remit there is to define the parameters around which people do have that kind of discretion, and be clear about where the team doesn't have that kind of discretion.
I just added the word genuine into that question there. If you make a genuine mistake on our team, I think that is an important distinction. The last thing really. We spoke about this very early on, and I mentioned call center teams. You spoke about finance teams. There are a bunch of functional teams that I think immediately spring to mind in terms of, look, if I want to improve the performance of my business, if I believe that the team is the sort of molecular unit that drives performance and we want to make them more agile, then my first thoughts when I generated this list were, let's have a look at call center teams, let's have a look at sales teams, finance teams, HR teams, engineering development teams. But then there are more dynamic teams like project teams that come together to work on a specific project to maybe bring a new offer to the market or to conduct some research or something like that. And they exist for a time. And then there's this far more rapid thing called a tiger team, which we were chatting about before we came on the air. A tiger team is something that's formed when there's either a specific opportunity or a specific issue to be dealt with, and you pull people from around the business who are able to have a look at what the issue is, let's say, analyze it, come up with a solution, then put that into effect. Or they see a new market opportunity, and a bunch of people are put together on that to address that with an offer that goes out to the market. So something that you're smiling.
I'm just envisaging something being thrown together in panic at the last minute.
But that's why this is important, though.
I think all, like I said at the beginning, the vast majority of people are members of a team of some description, but the things that make teams function effectively are pretty much the same across the board, and we know what those things are. They're like conflict resolution and decision making and open communication and a shared sense of purpose. And I think you get these kinds of things right and you get a solid functioning team. A lot of the things are learnt skills, however, particularly around things like dealing with conflict, dealing with feedback. Giving constructive feedback is a really difficult skill. Receiving constructive feedback is an even more difficult skill. And this is something that teams do have an issue with, and this is the C-suite as much as anyone else. So part of the whole process of developing good, well-functioning teams is developing these and valuing these kinds of skills.
Yeah, finishing a little bit on an example, I remember team leader. Some years ago, we'd done a 360 sort of engagement review amongst the team, and he said, yeah, well, one of the team members has got towering development opportunities, and we all thought that sounds fantastic. And then we thought, hang on a second, that means that guy's got real big issues that we need to deal with.
Absolutely.
But it was the way he communicated it.
Absolutely.
We were all running around. We formed a tiger team, I guess, to help this guy.
But my response to that would be, people respond to their team members, and so a towering development opportunity is probably just not for that individual alone, but for the team in general.
That's right.
And perhaps with the leadership. And one of the biggest things about high functioning teams, and particularly the leadership that inspires that, is you will have spectacularly good teams within your business. The trick is to identify them and identify what it is they're doing that's making a difference.
Yep.
And they may not be able to tell you, because actually these kinds of things can be quite under the radar.
Well,
and not
as I often say, the good news is that as a feedback company, we do have a team performance model, and we have a set of questions, just 5 actually, that get at exactly that, a team health check that will allow a team, so the team leader and all of the team members, to have a look across those 5 different areas that we spoke about a few moments ago: clarity, safety, learning, leadership, and support, and so on. So now I took a bit of a liberty and built this into a quiz, actually, that anybody listening to the webinar can take. We'll email this to you afterwards. Make sure you get a copy of this. Now, use it on your own team. So whether you're any of these, a call center manager, or HR director, performance manager, project teams of all shapes and sizes, tiger teams, very important. We know what tiger teams are, cross-functional or distributed teams. Borrowing a marketing slogan I created 15 years ago, whether that team's office or offsite or offshore, actually understanding how the team dynamics work. So I built this quiz, and you can use that. The real questions are built into one of our offerings, as you might imagine. But yeah, take the test and share this with other people around your business, because it would be great for you to understand, I think, a little bit about how your team's performing. And it would be great for us to maybe have a look at some of those results in aggregate, just to see where people are on that journey that we spoke about a little bit earlier on. We're slightly over time, but I can see some questions coming in. So if we've just got a couple of minutes, just for a couple of questions. So I spoke about the model that Questback had built. Can customers, other people, use their own model, or should they use the model that Questback provides?
Obviously, if you have an existing model that you use within your organization and it's built into your performance management and your training programs, absolutely that can be adopted and integrated.
You mentioned culture and values quite a lot. So
yes, obviously those are organizational specific to a large extent. So yes, absolutely those can be incorporated. Okay. And like I said, there aren't many organizations out there who don't have things like integrity in their value statements somewhere. So there's and also in terms of models of culture, of team culture, there's a big crossover between a lot of the models.
So just another quick question: should should I start with one team in the business and grow it, or should I just get the entire business to start with, moving towards agility?
It probably makes sense to start with a part of the business.
Okay. Any part in particular? Pick one of those role titles previously, or?
Well, I think the simplest answer is where you see you have the quickest wins.
Right.
And from a practical perspective, where you can demonstrate the value coming out of it in the most straightforward way.
Right.
Because obviously you want to provide a business case for the rest of the business to be following suit.
And so create your champions and your internal success.
Exactly, and okay. From a practical perspective, it makes sense to do that where the potential benefits are the most apparent and measurable. That's not cheating. That's being practical.
Let's just take one last one. it could almost be a yes or a no answer, I suppose. But is there any going back once I've started on this journey toward agility?
I'm just thinking about where that question comes from. If you're looking to establish high performance teams, that is not an objective that you will be interested in going back from, I don't suspect. If you think, okay, are we going in the right direction? Do we need to course correct? Then absolutely, you will need to do that, because the chances of you setting out on with a compass bearing that's never going to change is very, very slim indeed. And it's the same with any change process. You need to course correct, you need to base that on real-time information. And this kind of learning happens at all sorts of levels, not just within the teams, but at an organizational level as well. And the very common question is, okay, where do we start on this journey? And I would say, if you're defining teams as groups of people working towards a common purpose with complementary skills, that common purpose and those complementary skills are the places that you start.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully you found that interesting and educational. If you go back a couple of slides or you open up your email, you'll find a link to the quiz. That's the simplest place to start with you and the team that you're in. And you can just answer the questions. It's fun, it's educational, it's entertaining. It's not going to give you massive amounts of data and dashboards. It's kind of a quiz just to stimulate your thinking. We can, of course, get you the real thing to do the real diagnosis. But take the quiz, share it with other people, share your findings with us. Thanks to Andrew for taking part today. Interesting and challenging conversation, which is exactly how we like it on these webinars. Feel free to contact me through my email address. We've sorted you out with a Questback email address for people to get in touch with you. Hope that's okay if they can send questions
absolutely fine
through to you. So as I say, take the quiz, see how you get on with that, and join us for the next webinar as well. So thanks for joining today, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks very much.